Hey, it is your girl, Amy Plano, the reimbursement dietitian, here to simplify the reimbursement process for all registered dietitians and CNSs looking to accept insurance in your practice. And today I wanted to chat a little bit about the difference between documentation and a referral. And I want your ears to go up because even if you're not an insurance-based dietitian, this is super applicable and we need to talk about it. So even if you're a dietitian who is just providing super bills to your patient, you still need to be mindful of the next couple of minutes in terms of what I am going to talk about. So as you guys know, I know this has been drilled into our heads, but as registered dietitians, we cannot diagnose. So even if we know a patient has something, so whether they have celiac disease, they have an eating disorder, they have lactose intolerance, we cannot in any shape or form put that on a claim or put that on a super bill. So what that means is that if we want to use a medical code, so something like celiac disease, an eating disorder, lactose intolerance, hypertension, diabetes, I could go on and on and on. Anytime we want to use one of those ICD-10 codes, even if we know for fact our patient has that, we need that documented. And what that means is that that documentation can come in the form of a progress note, can come in the form of a referral, can come in the form of a discharge summary, it can come in the form of a lab slip, as long as somebody else, typically an MD, DO, PA, APRN, even a therapist, depending upon your state, wrote down that diagnosis and you didn't, then you can then go and use that ICD-10 code either in your super bill or on your CMS 1500 form. It is very different when it comes to Z codes. So Z codes are codes that we can use that start with a Z that often, not always, often are considered preventative on many patients' policies. Those might be Z71.3, those might be Z72.4, that might be a BMI code represented by a Z code. So say, for example, somebody had a BMI of 31, that BMI code would be Z68.31. All of those Z codes, we as registered dietitians and CNSs can liberally use both on a super bill, in our notes, as well as on an insurance claim, okay? But even if you are doing a super bill and your patient has anorexia, you cannot in any shape or form go and use the F code on your super bill or anywhere else, right? So what does that mean relative to a referral? Well, a referral is a type of documentation, but a referral is typically policy driven. So it is generally dictated by a patient's policy. So we call and we verify a patient's benefits and they say, hey, PS, Amy, patient has an HMO and a PCP referral is required in addition to Medicare. Medicare always 1,000,000%, I don't care what they tell you when you call to verify, requires a referral. A referral is a formal document signed by the doctor, generally can only originate from an MD or a DO for Medicare and has different stipulations. I'm not going to go dive deep into a referral. I'll do a whole nother video on what a referral is and what it is not. But I just wanted to use an example because many dietitians get confused and they think that when I say you need documentation, they think that that equals a referral. Documentation is just a scope of practice thing, meaning as registered dietitians, we cannot diagnose. Therefore, we need it documented. The last thing I want to talk about, and it kind of gets a little bit confusing, but I know nobody wants to hear this, but when we use E codes like E66.3, which represents overweight, or E66.9, which is a type of obesity, even though we can diagnose and calculate a BMI to use, so say a patient is overweight and their BMI is 31 and we calculated it at Z68.31, we can use that. But even though that same patient who has a BMI of 31 is essentially obese, E66.9, we cannot use E codes or any other non-Z codes without documentation. And I know that's really annoying. And a lot of you guys would say to me, well, why does that matter, Amy? Because we can just calculate a BMI code. Well, that is true because under the Affordable Care Act, when we are billing under preventative services, typically overweight BMIs and obese BMIs codes give a ton of frequency of visits. But what I have found in my practice is why we get documentation just to use E66.3 and E66.9. It is a shoe in with every single insurance company in terms of getting covered visits. I can't really think of a fully funded group plan that does not give a ton of visits for E66.3 and E66.9. Are they essentially the same thing as an overweight BMI code? Absolutely. But with that being said, I much rather run the hills first and coast at the end. On the policies, do they state overweight BMI codes, which we can document? We can calculate without documentation. Use those. But what I will tell you in my experience is I do not like rejections. And in my practice, we probably have 0 to 1 rejections per month. And that's because I know what the policies require. And even though I know they might take an elevated BMI code, I'm not going to sit around and wait for the claim to get denied. In my practice, we just get a progress note that serves as the documentation. And just to be very clear, in the documentation has to have the specific ICD-10 code. So if I'm going to bill for diabetes with no complications, in my documentation, whether it be the progress note, the discharge summary, the referral, the lab slip, it has to say specifically the type of diabetes, E11.65. I'm just using an example, right? I think there's something like 28 different types of diabetes, right? And that's one of the reasons why we don't want to be responsible for diagnosing. We're just going to let somebody else do that. We're going to ask for the documentation of it, and then we're going to use it. I know I said that was going to be the last thing, but I want to say one more thing. If you are in California, Alabama, or Tennessee, those are states that, independent of billing insurance or being a cash-based dietitian, if you are providing MNT, you need an MD referral in all 3 of those states. I'm going to repeat that again because I see a lot of California-based dietitians who don't accept insurance not getting referrals. You're in a state where your law dictates you are required when you provide MNT. Don't get mad at me. I don't make up the rules. I'm just telling you, California, Tennessee, Alabama, those are the 3 that require a referral, different than documentation. So hopefully that helps give you a little bit of clarity. If you go to reimbursementdietitian.com and the blogs from 2021, I'd have a really good blog on this, but sometimes I feel like everybody benefits differently and some people just do better with video. So this is basically a video version of that blog, but if you'd like to read it, I'll probably link it below the video. So then you can go ahead and read that, and that will support this. And as always, I'm here if you guys have questions. Once again, I'm Amy Plano, the reimbursement dietitian, and my job here on this planet is to help simplify all of these shenanigans for you.